Hello everybody, Damien Erskine here. Welcome fellow no treblers. This week I thought it would be easier to do a video than to notate some things and try and write an article about the question that came in. The question being, in essence, somebody wrote in and asked how to navigate between 16th notes and triplets. They essentially said they can feel 16ths and 8ths like most of us can. They struggled a little bit with triplets, and they said that by no means could they go back and forth if a line incorporated both, or and they just couldn't move back and forth between 16th notes and triplets. So I thought of a few things I used to do when working on this stuff, and I will also reference some past articles I've written, specifically one, I think it was called Thinking Like a Drummer, or something along those lines, where it really just focused on rhythm and how to practice rhythm like a drummer, and just focus on rhythm by itself without worrying about harmony and scales and modes and all of that good stuff. So in essence, it's a lot of stuff from that article, but I'll talk specifically about how I used to work with a metronome and practice going back and forth between 16th notes and 8th note triplets. So excuse me, just to make sure everybody's on the same page, when we play 16th notes, we are playing 4 subdivisions per beat: 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. And E and A are the internal subdivisions. That's how we tend to vocalize 16th notes. Beat 1 E and A, 2 E and A, 3 E and A, 4 E and A. And similarly, triplets, just like it sounds, is subdividing a beat into 3 equal parts. And those vocalizations are and a, 1 and a, 2 and a, 3 and a, 4 and a. I've found that a lot of my American or Western oriented bass students have always seemed to struggle a little more with triplets than with 16ths. So I mean, in the long run, really the only thing you're lacking is likely familiarity. The more familiar you are with a rhythm, the easier it is to just hear it and feel it internally. And the essence of the Thinking Like a Drummer article I've written, many articles about that kind of a thing, was in essence focusing on practicing subdivisions so you felt them internally. So it wasn't such a foreign feeling rhythm or concept. So first, I would just focus on 16th notes, work on those, all of the subdivisions, then triplets, all of the subdivisions, and then practice going back and forth. And I always like to, no matter what I'm doing when I practice, I try and make it musical. If I'm making music with something, it gives it a context. It's not just some dry exercise, and I tend to enjoy it more, which makes me more invested in the process, and I think I get more out of it in the long run. So quickly, working on individual subdivisions, I set my metronome to 60 beats per minute, and now I use a metronome called Tempo. I also have Dr. Betot. I have a ton of metronomes. Tempo has kind of become my go-to, and you'll notice that you can choose other subdivisions for it to play. So I can choose 16th notes and have it play all the 16th notes. So I will show you how I used something like this, although this kind of stuff didn't exist when I was coming up, to practice feeling all of those 16th notes. Initially, I find it useful at first to articulate every subdivision, It's also a good right hand exercise, or plucking hand exercise, I should say. And the way I worked on it was to mute every subdivision except for the one that I wanted, that articulate a note on the beat, the subdivision that I wanted to emphasize. So if I was playing downbeats, always alternating 1 2 1 2 1 2 with my plucking. Although if you do use more fingers, say you use the 3-finger technique like I do often, you can certainly do it that way as well. So initially I just focused on each subdivision one at a time. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a... Then I might focus on the E's, the second 16th, those E and a 2 E. And 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a... Now I'll do the U's. 1 E and a 2 E. Conceptually pretty easy to understand. You might find it a little more difficult than you anticipate. Once you can do that, it's nice to up the ante and start playing a scale or some kind of melodic pattern. It's messed up. I was going to try and talk. I can't talk and play at the same time. So I'm going to do the E's, the second 16th note, and I'm going to play an F major scale. 4. That'd be the U's. You can mix and match any type of pattern. I've laid this stuff pretty well out in a lot of my other columns, so I don't want to be too redundant. There's one more step, and then we'll move on to triplets. The next step, once you can do that pretty well, to me that helps, that kind of exercise helps me to really lock into the grid and start to feel where all of those different subdivisions lie in time as relating to the tempo. The next step is to get rid of playing every 16th note and just hone in on that one articulation. So now I'll do E's again. I'll do all 4 for you. I'll just stay on one note. I'll do each subdivision 4 times. So first downbeats. 1, 2, 3, 4 E, E, 2 E, 3 E, 4 E, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and then back again. And again, if you want to make it more complicated, you can up the tempo, do it faster. You can start playing scales and broken thirds. Anything you can think of, as creative as you can get. Just start playing around with those subdivisions. And now the same thing for triplets. I will set this to triplets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and And so it's nice and helpful when your metronome can play those subdivisions along with you. Once you're feeling pretty confident, it's good to shut those off and make sure that you can still really feel where they're happening. Triplets might be almost easier to feel at a faster tempo, but it's kind of a subtle shift in time. It's a subtle difference between the triplet and the 16th. To me, triplets feel more rounded. while 16ths feel more squared and boxy. That's just my own little way of thinking about it. Now, going back and forth between 16ths and triplets solidly. So it doesn't take you a bar or two to find the new rhythm, but so you can just shift. This is where it gets helpful to start creating bass lines using the rhythm. So you can internalize a musical phrase more so than thinking mathematically about the rhythm and the subdivisions and counting in your head. By the way, I can't count and play at the same time. Some people can, I cannot. I have to feel it, which is why I focus so much on internalization. Same thing with odd time signatures and all of that. It was a matter of getting comfortable with the rhythmic pattern, whatever that pattern is. Oftentimes with odd time signatures, it's just groupings of 2 and 3 put together in different ways, adding up to 5, 7, 9, 17, whatever. I can't count that stuff. I have to feel the rhythms and the rhythmic phrases fitting together like a puzzle. So initially, I just think starting slowly and simply, and then build from there. So it can be as simple as trying to play 4 beats of 16th notes and then 4 beats of triplets, 4 beats of 16ths, 4 notes of triplets. And for me, when I struggle with this stuff, I used to write everything out. I'd use grid paper. Say if it was however many, 16 lines per measure, I would put little dots and big beats and little dots to see where everything fit. So, I'm a visual thinker, though. So whatever you need to do in order to be able to visualize and feel where those things are happening. So let's say I'll do 16th notes. Dragging a little bit. So there I started playing every second and fourth, the E and the of the 16ths, and then the first and third triplet. I started omitting 1 or 2 subdivisions at a time, playing around with those. And that can be a great way to help you internalize those rhythms as well. Just grabbing 2 of the 3 triplets to start with. I'm playing all the notes and just accenting different subdivisions. But again, just going to quarter notes. Practice going back and forth. If you're struggling with one or the other, 16ths or triplets, chances are you're just not familiar enough yet with that rhythm. So if you find yourself never being able to go back to the triplet after you're playing 16th notes, just spend some more time on those triplets. Once you're equally familiar, or relatively somewhat close to equally familiar with those triplets as you are 16ths, it shouldn't be that hard to go back and forth. And again, I'm going to go back to creating some kind of bass line or groove or melodic idea using both of those concepts. So I'm just going to wing ding something. with some little idea that forces you to go back and forth. Record yourself playing it. Listen back. Does it feel solid? Can you really feel those triplets and those sixteenths? Are you transitioning smoothly where the triplets are all triplets and the sixteenths are all sixteenths? Or are you kind of fudging, fudging the in-between until you find it and then fudge and then find and then fudge and then find? And that's really, I think that's one of the best ways to just work on this stuff, is just to kind of keep rinse, repeat, practice, rinse, repeat. Focus on all of the subdivisions. Don't just, we can all feel the downbeats really strongly. Like I said, that it's just a matter of familiarity. We're very familiar with downbeats. We always feel where that time is, hopefully. And it's just a matter of working on those other subdivisions so you can feel those just as strongly and just as quickly. Ideally, it shouldn't take you any longer to find the second 16th note in a rhythm than it does to find the downbeat, or the third triplet in a rhythm than it does to find the downbeat. So that's really the best advice I have, is to focus on each rhythm separately. 16th notes, 8th notes, which are just the ands. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. Those are the upbeats. The E and the Us are then just half that again. And focus on, and then the triplets are probably what might be messing you up. So hang with the triplets for a while, then come up with a bass line that forces you to go back and forth. And if you do that 15, 20, 30 minutes a day, it won't take that long before you can find it pretty quickly. And once you can feel all of those rhythms happening internally, then your phrasing really starts to open up, when you can play through changes and kind of slip back and forth between 16th note and triplet lines, or 30 seconds and 16th note triplets, however fast you want to be able to play, 8th notes and quarter note triplets, whatever. It really frees up your phrasing. You can get pretty greasy within things when you mix those two things up. So I hope that helped somebody. And again, I'll put the link to the Thinking Like a Drummer article below this, so you can check that out as well. I think there's probably a lot of good stuff in there, hopefully. I don't know. So right on. Happy shedding. Come up with some bass lines, come up with some grooves, really focus on, live with these rhythms. You want to learn a rhythm, you just got to live with it, and make it your own, and make it do what you want. All right. Till next time.